Hey YouTube people, today I wanted to give you guys a few setup tips for setting up the HP Reverb G2. My goal with this headset was to use it in conjunction with the Valve Index controllers for hopefully the holy trifecta of VR gaming with the super high resolution that the G2 has and the very good tracking of the Valve Index controllers. But first, let's go into some really weird setup issues that I had with the G2. Unfortunately, this is a very new product, and I feel like there's quite a few things that you may run into that you'll just be like, it's broken. But let's go ahead and look at a few of those things because you can get around them and get it working fairly well. So let's take a look. And then at the end of this video, I'm going to give you all my pros and cons lists comparing the G2 to the Valve Index. Spoiler alert, I think I'm actually going to stick with the Valve Index for everything. So stay tuned, I'll tell you why, even though this is a very nice, clear looking headset. So let's get started. Okay, so the first issue I had with the Reverb G2 was you've got your little box here that has a USB display port and power coming off of it. What happened for me was it has this USB-C connector that's also connected to a USB-A adapter. And I have an X570 motherboard, Ryzen, and I tried every single USB port on the back of my computer, and it did not work. Which is not a great first experience with the product. However, reading in the Reddit message boards, it said if you use an externally powered USB hub, it should start working. And believe it or not, once I put it into my externally powered USB hub, everything started working perfectly. So I don't know what the deal is with that, but there is an HP representative on the Reddit forums that has basically said that they are finding issues with X570 and quite a few users reporting B550 as well issues. So that was definitely something that was not a good first experience. The other problem I had was if you are someone who's going to be using Valve Index controllers, you'll need some dongles. I've got some Vive Tracker dongles. In fact, I have 3 of them here, and with my Valve Index, I'm able to plug them in to this USB port, all 3 of them right next to each other. 0 issues. However, as I was trying to calibrate my play space using all the tricks that you've maybe seen, where you install a special plug-in to SteamVR and calibrate it your Valve Index controller with the Windows MR controller. That just, it worked, and then all of a sudden my controllers would be way over there or way over here and just all over the place, and I was just, man, what is going on? So finally I realized that I could no longer put these trackers on the same hub as the VR headset. I don't know if that's a bandwidth thing, but by placing the 2 trackers on different USB ports, all my problems went away and the tracking stabilized and started working as expected. So I'm able to use my HP Reverb and the Valve Index controllers at the same time. No issues whatsoever. So hopefully that helps you. You may get your G2 and say, what the heck, it's not working. I've seen several people say they've already RMA'd theirs, and I wonder if they maybe tried a different USB setup that it would work for them, but it is what it is. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes and talk about the Valve Index versus the HP G2. So let's talk about comfort. It actually feels quite good. There's no knob on the back of here, which I thought is good because you're not resting your head against something, but also bad because really hard to let multiple users put the headset on and off. However, check this out. if you pull on it, it actually has quite a bit of flex, which means that you can keep it at a certain length, and someone with a slightly smaller head, it's going to cinch up to them. And then a person with a slightly larger head, it's going to pull out. And it actually is not that big a deal if you're using it with adults. Moving down to kids, you're going to have to adjust all the straps, which is not a lot of fun. Which something like the valve index here with its knob on the back here, it makes for a much easier experience. If you take a look at these two headsets side by side, they are both very similar looking. You can see that the facial interface is almost the same color. Valve had a lot of input on the G2 from what I hear, but you can see the G2 has an almost wider head area here. I feel like it would accommodate larger heads, where the valve index, maybe I can turn these. So the valve index has a more distinct curve, and once you jam your face in there, it straightens out a little bit, but the curve on the G2 is slightly less. So comfort-wise, the G2 a little bit lighter than the valve index. It feels great. I don't really have any issues with it in terms of comfort. It's probably the most comfortable headset I've ever worn, with the valve index being a close second. Let's talk about clarity. So the G2 is definitely the highest clarity device on the market right now. And what does that mean in terms of real world experience? Well, I played through the first section of Half-Life Alyx again using this headset, and I was blown away by how many pieces of paper and propaganda all over the game world that I did not even notice on my playthrough on the Valve Index. The clarity is really good. The first thing I noticed though was I thought, does Alyx have foveated rendering? Because what I was seeing is that right in the center of my view, in the center of my lens, I was seeing super clear, that 4K detail of this panel right there. And just outside of the center circle of where your pupils are looking, it looks slightly fuzzy. And I kept thinking, is this foveated rendering because it gets slightly blurry? Is it noticing where I'm looking and upping the textures? I couldn't tell what was going on. And I finally realized it really is, there's so much detail on this display that there's this tiny, I'm using the word sweet spot, which is a loaded term because it can mean lots of different things depending how you're using it. But there's like a tiny circle right in the center of where you look, which is great because it's in the right spot, that is very, very clear. But if something moves just outside the field of your direct vision, and it's still right in front of you, it's just slightly off of where your head is facing, it starts to blur just slightly. And if you have good, maybe not all people would notice this. And I don't think that the lenses, and this would be a problem with the lenses. And I don't think that the G2 lenses are any worse than any other headset. I think the G2 has so much detail that you're able to observe the loss and the slight blur of the pixels when it goes slightly outside that center ring. And I found that very distracting. It constantly, because if you're tracking like a bird flying by in Half-Life Alyx or the textures of the buildings, you'll see them kind of like, as you pan your head, like things will come into view. If you're looking at a spot on a if you're reading some text on a wall in Alyx or something, but you're still turning your head, you'll see the detail come in and out depending on if your head is pointed directly at it. And to me, that it felt like the world was shifting a little bit. almost like my camera going out of focus there for a second. That's what it feels like. And I did accommodate to it a little bit as I played more and more, as I started to stop focusing on the details, which would, because I was testing a new clear device. I wanted to see what that looked like. As I started playing the game, I didn't notice it nearly as much, unless in scenes that weren't quite as bright, it wasn't nearly as observable. Once you got in some of the darker areas, I wasn't noticing it, and I was just playing the game and having a great time. The fidelity that you get out of this headset is amazing. I have not experienced stuff looking so real. And it's funny, using the Valve Index versus coming to the G2, it's hard to explain, because if you can't put your own head in the device, you can't truly know what that means. But my best estimation of a way that I could explain it to you, the viewer of this video, is when you have the G2 on and you're looking at something, I almost feel like the presence is there a lot with the Valve Index. Like you see it, you feel it there, but it almost looks like it's a lower texture level. Like if you've played any games and you've gone from like a medium texture detail to an ultra high texture detail, that's what it felt like, because the object isn't really changing, but the details in the object just start standing out. Any intricate bit of texture that may have just been kind of blurry on the Valve Index, or you weren't seeing the high amounts of detail, now you're seeing it with the G2. In fact, there's games I've played where there's text on the screen, and in the Valve Index, it looks, the texture on the, let's like say you have some text like lobby or whatever, in the Index, it looks perfectly 100% like, oh, this looks fine. But then when you look at it in the G2, you can actually see, oh, I'm making out the pixels of that texture map rather than the pixels of the headset. So it has more detail than the artwork in your game, which that is a huge plus for the G2. So I'm really happy with the G2 in terms of that. I'd also like to talk for a second about color accuracy. So I find these panels far and away, if you've used the Valve Index and you know like how well calibrated for colors that headset is, this is at least on par, if not exceeding it to some extent. Everything looks great. It looks very clear. The colors do pop. It feels very realistic. In Half-Life Alyx, you're looking at your hands, you're looking at world objects. It is very good. I feel like they've done a good job calibrating the display. So I've talked up a lot of the cool things about the detail in this headset, but let me talk about the bad things for a minute. The first bad thing is field of view. There is no eye relief on the back, on the side of this, that lets you adjust how close those lenses are to your eye. And if I pull up the Valve Index here in a side-by-side, hopefully I can, well, I'll just show you. Here's the Valve Index. So here's the Valve Index, and you can see how close those lenses, if you look at them, they're almost coming out of the facial interface and extremely close to your eye. If you look at the G2, not so much. You have like quite a big gap from the lens to the facial interface, which just tells you your eye's not as close to the lens. And combine that with the fact that the G2 lenses are smaller than the Index lenses, and you know that the field of view on the G2 is just not as good. In fact, I would compare it to the original Vive or the Vive Pro without having adjusted any of the standard faceplates, because on both of those you could use a thin interface and get your head really in there. You might be able to do the same thing with this, with the different facial interface. But it felt, I'm gonna be honest, it felt like a step backwards going from the Valve Index to this one. The Valve Index has such a great vertical field of view that with my face shape and the Valve Index, I almost can't make out the tops and bottoms of the Valve Index. With this one, I felt like I was in binoculars. I did not enjoy that aspect of the G2. It's really hard to go to once you've got a taste of an increased field of view, both vertically and horizontally on the Valve Index. Coming back to this just was really hard for me. I felt like I had to, instead of just glancing down with my eyeballs, like my pupils looking down, like in the Valve Index, you can be looking forward, kind of glance down and look back up without using your head. With this one, if you wanted to look at something that was down by your feet, it was like you're moving your head to do any little thing to make things out, which really, from an experience standpoint, that made it a little more difficult to swallow. So let's go ahead and talk about a few other things. Tracking. So we've got 4 cameras, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to be honest, I have used lots of Windows Mixed Reality headsets. Samsung Odyssey Plus, the Lenovo Explorer. I'm familiar with it. I don't know what's wrong. I think it will probably get better as they adjust the drivers. However, I found that even the head tracking on this device was not nearly as good as even the Samsung Odyssey. I'm sorry. I'm sure they'll improve on that, but right now, it's not as good. And let me give you the biggest place where I noticed it. Half-Life Alyx wasn't that big a deal. You're usually standing, turning, not an issue. Where it was a big deal was in something like Beat Saber. So with this G2, as I was playing Beat Saber and dodging things, at walls that were coming at me and kind of bouncing up and down, I got a lot of tracking errors doing that. Like, to the extent, like, I've used the Quest 2, never experienced something where the head tracking was not tracking hardly. It was bad. I have a brightly lit room. I don't know if this pattern on my wall played into it. You would think a pattern like this would actually help it track using the optical cameras. But my experience was the head tracking felt very off when bouncing quickly in Beat Saber. So if that is a consideration for you, I would maybe hold off a little bit and see if it gets better. But for me, this really caused issues. I didn't even touch hardly the Windows MR controller that it comes with. Feels good. I like the button placement. But once I got my Valve Index trackers going, I use those the full time. But I imagine it suffers from. You don't need to read my review for that. You know what the deal is with that. It's adequate, but if you're really into shooters and things, you're going to have some issues that maybe you can work around, but it could be an issue. So let's talk the last thing, and this is kind of the clincher for me, why I really wanted to use this as my headset, because it's comfortable, it's light, it's super clear, best resolution on the market, but the reason I can't, the biggest reason is I don't know if it's stereo overlap. I don't know. I haven't researched it enough to actually know the dynamics of what is going on. But as I've used this headset, I experience eye strain to a significant degree more than I do on the Valve Index. Valve Index, I can be in there I've been in there 6-7 hours, no issues. Even the Odyssey, I have never had an issue with this. With this headset, I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't like either my facial geometry or something, or maybe it's because there's not as much stereo overlap. I don't know what it is, but the second I come out of this headset, I feel like I'm a little bit cross-eyed. I know how to adjust IPD. I know how to, I've used a lot of headsets. I know how to adjust it correctly, but whatever reason, I'm getting eye strain on this more than any other device I've used. Sans maybe some really low quality Windows mixed reality headsets. And this is a mixed reality headset. I'm not saying that's what it is, but for me, the comfort in terms of eye strain was a problem. One last thing that I want to talk about is how does this feel when you're using it as a virtual desktop? And I'm going to put it out there. This is, oh man, it makes me excited for the future of VR to see this headset and use it with a virtual desktop, because it is very clear. If I'm using even the Valve Index, which is a pretty clear headset, if I'm trying to read text or work with Windows Explorer and manage files and do things, it's hard. It's not something you want to do for long periods of time, or you wouldn't even want to sit down and try to use your computer with a headset on with the Valve Index. With this headset, I feel like you actually could do that. I know people say, like, with the Virtual Wanderer in here, it's probably like having a 720p monitor, but I disagree. If you blow up the monitor to like fill more of your field of view, it is high resolution. I run 1440p monitor, so in my Steam desktop overlay, if you ramp that up bigger, like, it is super clear. Like, you could watch videos easily in here. If you like to watch multimedia on this headset, I think this is maybe the headset for you. So let's talk about who this headset is actually for. I don't think it's for the VR gamer who's using VR controllers and doing VR things. You're better suited to a Valve Index controller with high refresh rates on the Valve Index and way better tracking. But if you are a VR sim person, or you want to do 3D modeling, oh my gosh, this is probably the headset for you, because you get so much detail. You can interact with things that are right in front of you, and that's what you want when you're examining and modeling and detailing things. Or if you like to watch 3D movies or just standard movies in a headset like this, you could get a gigantic screen, and it's going to be clear, super clear compared to any other headset except maybe the original Reverb. But definitely this could be your device. So anyways, hopefully my thoughts and ramblings actually help you make a decision on the G2, and maybe you can avoid some of the pitfalls when you get it set up. So thanks for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to the Seabutters channel. We got lots of content on VR, tech, and all sorts of things. So anyways, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys later.